Hi everyone, we're back since we had the crash. I wanted to have a look at a few things. I have been able to pay attention to all the media out there and all of the discussion about, obviously, electric motors. Some of the specifications that are being thrown around by different people on the internet. The motor of the moment, or the motor of the marketing moment, is the DJI on the Amflow. I haven't actually tested this motor, but I have tested all of the other motors out there, apart from one, which have the same power settings as that motor and the same or similar torque settings. Don't forget, this video is brought to you by Liat, and they do loads of protection. Go check out their website. So this got me thinking. I was looking really carefully at all of the content out there on YouTube, especially discussing this motor. So there's quite a few people who've got them now and have been testing this bike. The bike will be available in Germany, the UK, Australia first, and then it'll come to the other European markets and probably America in the new year. So it's a great looking bike, but I'm a little bit concerned with, let's call it the bias out there. Or is it marketing? I'm not sure. Is it bias or is it marketing? The headline stats of this bike is 1,000 watts of peak power. So by my understanding, based on the EN 15194 2017 standard, 1,000 watts peak power is illegal. How are they measuring it? This is what I don't understand. So if you look at the EN 15194 standard, the peak power needs to be no more than 500, 600 watts. So this motor is apparently putting out 1,000, which would take it outside the regulation of the 25 kilometers an hour sort of class 1 type e-bike. What I'm thinking is that, of course, a company like that would not make something that doesn't respect the standard. So they're probably quoting a number that's for a certain cycle in the pedal stroke that you only hit for probably 0.1 of a second or something, but I don't know exactly what. So there's three characteristics of an electric motor which need to be considered. One is work, the other one is torque, and the other one is power. Work is the result of the force acting over some distance. Torque is the rotating force produced by a motor's crankshaft. Power is how rapidly work is accomplished. I want to know, where are they measuring all these numbers? Are they measuring it at the wheel? Are they measuring it at the motor shaft? It's not very clear. And I think these motor companies who are pushing all these big numbers need to actually come out with some transparency on these figures for the consumer's sake. It's becoming a little bit of a game with who's got the bigger number and why. It reminds me a little bit of the digital camera world with the megapixel. So why am I getting into this? Well, the thing is a lot of the content creators out there who are talking about this, to me, seem like they are not actually talking about this new motor in a comparative sense. They're comparing it to motors which have a significantly less amount of torque and power, which means to me that they're saying it's like one of the best things to happen or the most exciting things to happen, but it's not the only motor with these stats which is on the market. I've looked at all the channels, seen what they've tried, and I can clearly see that there aren't any tests about the Paulini motor, the Sachs RS, also the latest Ascol motor. And I am sure if I put all three of those motors up against the DJI, you'll start to see that the DJI is pretty much the same as those motors. Bosch have just launched a new motor. I have tested it. It's a good motor. You can have a look at the review. There's another link in the description for that. 85 Newton meters, the same as it was the last version, but it's a much more regulated power, really nice, smooth feeling. Bosch have been very clear about their approach to the e-bike market and numbers and power. To stay within the regulations. Don't fiddle with your e-bike power, because you could ruin the fun for everyone. And these bikes could end up being classified as motorbikes and needing number plates and insurance and indicators and lights and all kinds of crazy stuff. So the point is, if you're quoting these crazy numbers, you're starting to show that you want the e-bikes, especially in the EU and America under class 1, to be not considered e-bicycles anymore, but motorbikes, because you're quoting numbers which are motorbike power numbers. Now, up to about a year and a half ago, none of this was happening. Everyone was just quoting 250 watts nominal power and the torque rating, which the torque rating is fine. There's also another motor out there which is 110 Newton meters of torque for a very long time, and that is the Rocky Mountain. One thing I will, it's got a lot of torque, very low down torque, and yeah, that is something which hasn't been on the hype train, and I'm just kind of surprised why this there's this sort of hype train about torque and power, and no comparison to other motors that are out there that already have similar numbers. So the whole point of this video is just basically to sort of call it out and say what is going on, and could all the other content creators actually start, please, not talking this way and actually compare motors fairly against other motors of the same power and torque vectors, let's say. Otherwise, you're giving a false impression and you're just jumping on a hype train with regard to one company. Now, yes, people are talking about lightweight and high power, but that's not strictly true, because if you take a look at, say, the Amflow bike, a headline weight of 19.5 kilos, but that bike, based on the people I've spoken to who've ridden it, is basically a cross-country stroke trail bike. For a bike which has been tested by quite a few people, and they say it's more of a trail bike, it's being shown as more of an enduro bike. Now, this reminds me a little bit of the Orbea Rise when they first launched that. I saw the first footage of that bike. I thought, oh wow, it's kind of almost enduro. I can go all mountain enduro. I can go ride it quite strong. I then got a hold of that bike and I went for a ride on it, and I felt like I was riding a cross-country bike. I didn't really feel like it was an all-mountain bike. So as soon as you pointed it downhill, you immediately felt the limits of the brakes, the geometry. You're like, hang on a minute, this bike, it's lightweight, but you cannot push it to the extreme. And it seems like the weight advantage has been gained mainly with the tyres, the wheels, and the suspension settings on the fork. So to me, it feels like it's not necessarily leading the consumer up the right path. You start to realize that the actual use case of this power is very, very narrow. So I discovered on having a month with this motor that had the Ascol motor, 110 Newton meters, I discovered that I was probably using the top power mode about, in that month where it was useful, I used it about 3 times on very, very steep, very, very particular climbs, but 3 times in 1 month, which to me told me there's more to than these just headline power numbers and torque numbers. It reminds me of the digital camera market in the early 2000s with the megapixel race. Now, I do know that obviously, you know, Shimano and other brands will be working on motors which have similar statistics. Basically, what we're talking about is we're talking about the whole market moving up a level, especially with regard to torque. But remember, they will be of limited use, and you'll probably lose grip when you're riding up a very steep hill unless you know how to regulate that power. The reality of these numbers on the actual pedalability and use case of each bike needs to be considered more carefully, and I don't think the content creators out there are talking about it fairly. To understand if the regulations are being respected, we really need to get in close and understand how these numbers are being calculated and how they're being measured. Otherwise, we're just talking without knowing anything, which touches me on the last point that I want to cover now, which is all about the lightweight batteries. Basically, power density went up because everybody switched to 21700 cells. They're all basically the same cells. There's 5 companies making cells, and they're just being reused and repackaged, obviously, by the battery manufacturers into the various form factors for all these bikes. So there's nothing special that's going on there. It's until everybody's tried it, and because there's some great magazines out there who are really testing things in detail and take a long time and a long approach. And I would really like to see their opinions before, rather than just trusting some of the sorts of content creators out there, which in my opinion aren't being completely straight as well, because I see they don't even necessarily mark whether their work is paid for, promoted or not. There's a YouTube label you can tick on, and you can definitely do that easily and just say, hey, this is promoted. All my videos where I had support, I always put that, and I've noticed a lot of them don't. So if you look at the computer tech industry, what they do, a lot more transparency in the tech industry, especially when it comes to measuring computers, stats, and all of that stuff. There's a lot less fluff being promoted, and I think that's really important to consider. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will see you on the next video, and I will be riding a bike at some point, but we'll see. Anyway, thanks everyone. Bye.